Hi, I'm Marcus Hunt, COO and co-founder of Title Success Solutions, attorney and co-owner of South Oak Title.
And I'm Pat Smith. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Title Success Solutions. I'm also a practicing attorney and formerly the president of Title South, a title agency headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama.
Our presentation today focuses on the importance of succession and business continuity planning for a title agency owner.
A succession and business continuity plan for the title agency is akin to a will and living trust for the individual. It's a way for the agency owner to plan and ensure that his or her desires for the business are known and followed, and that the value of the business is maximized for the owner and or his heirs. It also ensures that the business can continue uninterrupted in the event of an unexpected tragedy.
And like an estate plan, a succession and business continuity plan starts with defining the agency owner's objectives for the continuation of the agency after the owner is ready to move on or meets with an unexpected illness, disability, or tragedy.
The succession plan also ensures that the monetary and brand value that the agency owner and the management team worked hard to build over the course of many years is maximized and preserved. A well-designed succession plan is likely to involve a number of different strategies as well as a number of professional advisors. There will be lawyers, accountants, consultants, financial planners, title underwriters, life insurance professionals, business brokers. All have a valuable and important role in the design and implementation of an agency's succession plan. Don't be intimidated or reluctant to go ahead and put this team together now. Marcus, what are some of the objectives of the agency's succession plan?
Well, Pat, as you mentioned before, the succession plan is about meeting ownership, employee, and customer needs, as well as the maximization of value and the continuation of the brand. For most agency owners, the agency likely represents the largest asset in the owner's portfolio, and yet is likely the least liquid. We've seen anecdotal evidence that the average age of the title insurance employee just in our state in Alabama is in the late 50s, and many agency owners are well in their 60s and 70s and continue to work in their agency well beyond the usual and customary retirement age. For some owners, this is because they truly enjoy the work and look forward to going to the title plant or office every day. And for others, it's because they don't know how to get out of the business, how to value their company, or even how to go about monetizing their investment. Some companies that hold considerable value simply fade away because the owner hasn't planned for the time when he or she leaves the business. Yet other companies are in the danger of closing or may have even closed because the owner became ill or had not implemented a business continuity plan. There are a variety of techniques a succession planning team can utilize to help agency owners meet their objectives. For example, Pat, the maximization of the value of the company to a prospective purchaser really depends on numerous factors. These include, how well the company is managed, the agency's customer mix, so what type of customers, whether it's, more lender-driven, more builder-driven, just kind of the mix there.
Right.
The company's technology and kind of the state of it, are they outdated?
Yeah, especially in this market where because of many people working from home, that you have to be adaptive and have technology that will travel with the employee rather than the resident in your office.
Yeah. So how dependent is the office on paper and how much it has gone more digital.
Exactly. Yeah.
Also, just how the company's financials are. Is there a lot of debt that the company has? Kind of what the revenue streams are. And so what the finances look like. And how the company functions independent of the role of the current owner, because a lot of times the owner really is the sole driving factor. And so if that's the case, that really is a big factor when you're looking at things to consider.
We've seen a lot of that. And Marcus, what I hear you saying is that regardless of when the owner thinks he or she may plan to transition out of agency operations, and notwithstanding the unexpected or premature exit, the initial planning for succession is to ensure that the agency is operating at its peak efficiency.
And that's right. Pat, a company in which workflow processes and procedures are well designed, documented, examined and reviewed on a regular basis is going to have more value than one where these processes have been just kind of, haphazardly put together, or just, there's no real structure to them.
They just kind of come together and take on a life of their own unless you purposely put those together.
Yeah. So the first step in creating a succession plan should be to review the operation of the agency, its workflows, its processes, as well as its financial reporting and level of compliance with regulatory and underwriting underwriter requirements.
Marcus, I've had some experience with this. I managed a title company where over a long period of time, the processes had just more or less come together. Employees were kind of doing the same job, were doing things differently, and there was no real consistency as to how things were getting done. I mean, we were getting things done, and we thought we were doing a great job, but we were so inefficient. But it's hard to see the problem areas when they're right in front of your face every day. So this is a project where outside help is essential to get an objective view of how things are being done and to design and implement processes and workflow changes. It's a difficult process, and because it's hard to get employees to give up the way they've always done something. They're not convinced that the new way will be better.
Right.
But in my experience, this is an investment that pays off both in improved efficiencies as well as a greater valuation for the agency, regardless of the other elements of a succession or business continuity plan.
Yeah. I mean, it really does. It can help a company in the current state, but also as you look for and forward to, a transition down the road.
Exactly.
So Pat, when an agency owner undertakes this operational review, how would they start? Kind of go through that, and where would they turn for help?
Okay, well, I'll draw again on our own experiences. At our company, we were fortunate that our parent company, which is a large national title company, employed a workflow specialist. She had previously worked for our software vendor, and she came to our office and stayed several days. She just observed, watched what everybody was doing, how they were doing it, interviewed our managers and our employees about their jobs, walked around and got a sense for the way things were being done. And then she went away and worked and came back with a really well-designed and greatly improved workflow process for us to implement. If your agency isn't so fortunate to have someone readily available to do that, there's still resources that you can go to.
And I mean, you've got a lot of small to mid-sized companies where either don't have the resources or have the connection to someone that can come in and do that kind of evaluation.
Marcus, we're going to talk a little bit later on about the role of your underwriter state manager. And this is a perfect example of when it's really helpful to reach out to your state underwriter or your state manager if you're underwriter and just say, hey, we're not real sure we're doing things as smoothly as we could.
Right.
Can you or do you have someone who can come in and help us? I'm pretty certain that all of the major underwriters have people on their teams that can be directed to help with this process. Also, your software vendor. I mean, they've put together the software to work a certain way, to have a certain workflow, and you can customize it within that.
Yeah.
But the software vendors I've worked for or worked with have all had somebody that could come and work with you to make that process better.
Lay out that plan, put together that process. Most of these software companies these days actually are built towards a little more automation, a little more of a process flow.
Absolutely, and reducing the number of keystrokes, eliminating the possibility of input errors, just a whole number of things that they can help with. And beyond the underwriter and beyond the software vendors, there are also quite a few independent software and workflow consultants who can come into your company and help you with this process. The main thing is, regardless of who you work with somebody. This is a process that really does benefit from having someone from outside your organization come in and look at the way things are being done.
So the operational review is important, and not just for succession planning, but certainly if an agency is designing a succession plan. And we talk about that. Succession planning really isn't just for the end game. It's really kind of for how things are running kind of in between, the day you implement something, a plan and kind of the end game.
Well, because the better that you are able to manage your agency, the more organized, the better your systems are, the better they're documented. That is not only going to make you more operationally efficient and therefore profitable, but it's also going to increase the value of your company to somebody that's coming in down the road. That's right.
Along with putting together the team of professionals involved in the process, the operational review is part of what we call the prepare part of the succession planning process. Another part of the prepare process is the review of the role of the current owner in the day-to-day activities. And Pat, tell us why that's important.
Well, Marcus, you and I have not only seen this in other agencies, I suspect we've lived it in our own agencies. In many companies, the owners spend a great deal of their time on a day-to-day basis working in the business. That is, they're still actively involved in title production and closing operations. This is understandable. Most agency owners started out like us, as lawyers or underwriters or researchers, or doing some task in the operational and production, and so it's hard to get out of that. Once you're there, you kind of locked into it because it's familiar and you're probably really good at it. So many agency owners still go to the plant, they still review research, they underwrite commitments and conduct closings at the closing table.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, if an agency owner is considering the sale of the company as part of his or her succession plan, it's better if the owner pulls back from the day-to-day activities of working in that company and starts to spend more of his or her efforts implementing a succession and operational plan, including identifying key personnel who are likely to manage the company after the transition, and then start to mentor them into the positions they're expected to fill. One point here, and this is something that I did at the title company I managed. I wanted to make sure that if any one of my key employees fell ill, walked off the job to take another job, or got run over by a truck, whatever the situation was, that I pretty much had in mind who was going to sit in their chair the next day, even my own.
Right.
And I made that known. And some of those people worked within our business, in our company, and others worked for competitors like you.
Yeah.
But I always wanted to know who was going to fill that seat if something happened. That's kind of succession plan at a granular level. So that's something to consider as we talk about all this. Now, if the agency owner still is actively and regularly connected to customers, is still going on sales calls, is still going to sales meetings and all, that's great, but it'd probably be a good idea if he or she starts to kind of conduct those engagements on a higher level and shift some of those day-to-day sales efforts to the company's sales professionals.
Yeah, because you really don't want, all your sales or those relationships to completely be tied to that owner, where an owner, even if an owner is slowing down and not visiting, clients as much, you do not want to see kind of a drop off in business because the attention is not being given to
and you
those
want
clients.
You want the agents, or you want the customer's loyalty to be to your company. You want it to be to the service that you provide, not necessarily to the person who's coming to your office ever so often to call on you or to
bring the donuts.
Do whatever they're going to do.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of the Methodist Church approach.
Right.
The Methodist Church will swap the preacher out every few years because they don't want you to get too fond of the preacher.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing there. Now, the situation may be a little bit different if our current owner plans to transfer the ownership of the agency to a current co-owner or to a family member that works in the business. If that's the case, it may not be quite as crucial for the owner to step back as it would be if the owner wants to or plans to transition the ownership to an outside or third party. But those who are stepping into the owner's shoes, whether now or down the road, they need to be trained, they need to be mentored, developed for the position. And if a current owner does that well, and invest time in it, whether the transition is to somebody who's already on your team or whether the transition is to somebody that's coming in from outside, it really helps make that transition smooth and seamless.
Yeah.
So, good point here. There's a good book that talks about the importance of working on rather than in your business. There's actually a couple of them. The first one I will mention is called Built to Sell by an author named John Warlow. I highly recommend it to any agency owner who still spends a lot of his or her daily activities involved in the title and closing production. And the second is the E-Myth.
Yeah.
There's a series of those.
Yeah.
There's the E-Myth and there's the E-Myth Attorney, which is kind of maybe more relevant to the title business because of the similarities. But if anybody listening is not familiar with those books, they're available Amazon. They're available on Audible.com or Scribed or any of the services. And
we'll have a slide at the end that'll kind of have
that'd
some
be great
information.
because those are really worth the investment of time to read them.
So Pat, you've mentioned the sale of the agency to a third party as well as the sale or transfer to an existing owner or family member. that brings us to the second phase of the succession planning process.
Yep.
That's the evaluation phase. In this phase, the agency owner becomes introspective and considers, whether there's a co-owner or investor in the agency. If so, what is that individual or entity's goal for the company? Do they want or expect to take over the company? If so, do they have the capital to make a one-time purchase, or would the purchase necessarily be an earn-out? What would suit the owner's individual estate, business, and tax planning needs? So these are all great questions that come up. Number two, does the owner have family members, especially like a spouse or a brother, sister, or a child that wants to be a part of the company and is looking to take over the business? When the owner is transitioning away.
Yep.
More often than not, though, Pat, we see agencies in which the owner's children don't want to be a part of the business. They've kind of grown up around it. They've seen what mom or dad has done.
So they don't want to
be a part of it. If their children or other family members in the succession plan, is gifting all or part of the ownership of the agency, part of the overall estate plan. I mean, these are all things that need to be considered. And if so, how's that going to be accomplished? I mean, these get into real, whether it's estate planning, questions or tax issues.
They're all interrelated.
Yeah, they're all connected.
Yep.
But if not, does the family member have the financial wherewithal to buy the company? So if it's not going to be a gifting or estate planning thing, does that, other co-owner or family member, have the ability to make the purchase and really help that current, the main owner transition out financially where they want to be.
Right.
So Pat, how can we take the transitioning owner and look at how to help them and the family member accomplish his or her goal?
Okay. Marcus, we'll talk in a few minutes about the importance of having a written, formal buy-sell agreement as part of a continuity plan. This is where the owner and the identified succeeding owners need to develop and document an agreement by which the current co-owner or family members make the purchase and how that purchase is going to be paid for. If there's enough capital to make that happen on a lump sum, that's fine. I think probably more often we're going to see a circumstance where there is an earn-out over time. Mm-hmm. That may be where the company's purchased on what is essentially an installment sale basis, where the payout and the ownership interest go along with each other. Right. There could be some security interest, and this is an area where working with your not only your estate planner but also your tax professionals, because there's certainly tax consequences in the sale of a business, and having a professional who's really tuned into that. I have an LLM in tax, which gives me just enough knowledge to be really dangerous, right, and enough to know that in that role I need to reach out to somebody that does it on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and Pat, I mean, and one of the things we kind of talk about, every deal that we've seen, every deal that we've been a part of, every single one of them are different. So whether it's a one big lump sum, whether it's some kind of creative financing piece, whether it's a hybrid of a combination of financing versus a lump sum versus some kind of earn out, there are many different options. And you really can't just look at a sale of a company as they're all vanilla across the board.
And I'll tell you just a kind of an interesting aside on that is I've been involved over times I've practiced an attorney in any number of asset purchase and corporate purchase agreements, and it's fallen to me to draft those documents. And I'll pull up a sample document, one that I've had is kind of generic, and I'll start working on it. And over the course of 3 or 4 drafts, even before we start getting input from the other side, by the time that's done, if you ran a red line on those 2 documents, it would be a sea of red. There wouldn't be anything there but red. So every deal is different, and every deal has to be considered on its own. There are some consistent things that tend to show up in those process, and where we're dealing with ownership transitions to identified individuals. Seriously consider the role of key man life insurance on the owner's life, or the life of the people who are possibly going to take that company over at some point. Disability insurance is a tool that often is overlooked in a continuity plan. If an owner who works actively in the business becomes disabled and can't work, we've still got to do the work that person was doing, and that person still needs to be cared for, and the company's income may not support all of that. Disability insurance can provide a vehicle to care for the disabled owner, and yet not put the company in a situation where they have to prematurely move to sell the company. So these are things to talk about as part of the continuity plan and to engage those professionals we mentioned earlier. There's another scenario that we've seen. This is where the agency has long-time employees, maybe been there 20, 25 years, and they've been led to believe or promised or at least in their mind think that they will at some point have a chance to buy the company in the future. If this is the case, what discussions have you had with those employees? What discussions do you need to have? Finally, as a current owner, you got to decide what you want the transition to look like. It's your company. When it comes times to retire or to transition into a new endeavor or challenge, do you want to just come in and shake everybody's hand, say goodbye, pat them on the back, and then kind of like Johnny Carson for the night show? I mean, he was gone. He didn't come back and co-host. I mean, you just didn't hear from him again. Or do you want to hand over the reins and then stick around and continue to do the things you love? I mean, to do research. Some people love research because it's like solving puzzles. Some people like to do closings because they like to engage with people at the table and start those conversations. Some people like to review commitments. So are you going to walk away or are you going to stick around? And you got to decide how you want that to look. So what the owner wants to do, along with the role and financial capabilities of the co-owners, the family members, and employees, all of these things together will steer the direction that this type of succession will go.
Yeah, and again, all are unique.
Yep, everyone's unique, and the owner's got to consider all those scenarios and possibilities, and not just in the retirement or transition scenario. I do a lot of estate planning, and one of the things that you have to have in estate planning is that difficult conversation is that we're all going to go away someday, and it's sometimes hard to say. So I use the phrase, what if you go over by a truck on the way to the office? Agency owners have to plan for that as well. They have to plan for the situation where a spouse or a child or a grandchild maybe becomes ill or injured and needs their full-time attention to provide care. You have to consider all of those possibilities, even if none of them look real likely right now.
And that's true. And so, great point, Pat. We've done our preparation. We talked about that. We've looked at kind of introspectively evaluation of our current situation and how the owner would like to transition, and it's time for the final phase, the design and implement phase. So this is really kind of where the rubber meets the road. Here's where the owner will implement decisions about how the transition will be structured, and we'll put in mechanisms to achieve the desired result if there is a sudden event, say a death or debilitating injury or a family member that's at home that needs caring for, just whatever kind of would remove them out of kind of the day-to-day operation. So let's talk about some of the techniques and tools an agency owner may consider in designing a business continuity and succession plan. So Pat, what would be a good starting point with the designing this plan?
Well, Marcus, sometimes I'll wander a bit and tell a story. When I was working on my LLM in taxation, I wrote an exam for the estate planning class. And the question involved making a listing of techniques, estate planning techniques for a particular scenario. So later on, I found out that my classmates, all very bright people, were designing really complex scenarios and schemes with offshore trust and Bahamian corporations and gifting schemes that involved all kinds of things. When I did mine, I sat back and looked at it, and the first technique I listed is to have adequate life and disability insurance. After the exams were graded, my professor, whom I'd known for my law school years, called me to tell me that I was the only person in the class that considered insurance tools and congratulated me for recognizing the role that those tools have in estate planning. So I think the same thing can be said of business continuity and succession planning. You've got to consider the role of key man or key woman life and disability insurance. If the succession plan is going to involve the purchase of an owner's interest by current employees or a co-owner, the key man policy can provide liquidity for the buyer to complete the transaction, as well as liquidity to the owner's estate if the transition comes about as a result of an owner's death. Similarly, disability insurance can provide the owner with continued income in the event of his or her disability, and we mentioned this earlier, it could eliminate or postpone the need for a company to be sold in order to provide for a disabled owner. So this is why a knowledgeable and trusted insurance professional needs to be a part of the succession and continuity planning team.
You know, Pat, another thing that came to my mind while you were talking about, key man insurance is the need for a buy-sell agreement among co-owners. You and I have talked about this on numerous occasions in our own businesses, and I thought this might be a good place to talk about it here.
Okay.
Many title insurance agencies have two or more owners.
Yep.
Agreeing ahead of time what will happen when one partner wants to transition and the other wants to continue the business can alleviate, really an ugly and value-killing business separation.
Oh yeah, there's nothing uglier than a business divorce among people that have worked together for decades, and then when things go wrong, they tend to go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And because these people have worked together for so long, they're comfortable. They're friends. Maybe their families, grew up together, and then to have a serious disagreement about the direction you want to go is just really a tragic situation that can all be easily avoided if, while we're all still good friends, we work this out.
Yeah, and a separation really can devalue the company rapidly.
Very quickly.
And so there are a number of different ways of talking about structuring and funding a buy-sell agreement. But the first step is to have the conversation.
Yep.
I mean, you've at least got to have that initial talk.
Yep.
This is a conversation, that needs to include CPA, your attorney, maybe a life insurance professional.
Yep.
And for those of you who have co-owners, do you know how you're going to transition, between the two, you and your partner? I mean, that really is a question that all of us with multiple, owners of a company need to ask ourselves.
Well, I'm reading a book now that's called the next right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole concept there is that you don't always have to worry about what's coming down the road, a week, a year, a month, 2 years, whatever from now, is that you worry about what's the next right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where the next right thing to do is to probably realize that we need to have that conversation and to put a group together and sit down. This is something you and I probably need to talk about for our businesses. What's the old saying? The cobbler's shoes have holes in their soles, or physician heal thyself. So we've talked about key man life, disability insurance, and buy-sell agreements, and those are all important in succession and business continuity planning. At some point, however, many agency owners or their estates are going to need or want to sell that agency. This could be a part of the overall business strategy of an entrepreneurial-minded owner. You have entrepreneurial tendencies, who's looking to grow the business with the intent of building something there that can be sold.
Right.
It could be part of a transition strategy. An owner wants to move out of the title industry, but I don't know why anybody want to do that, but I hear it happens. They may want to focus on different endeavors. I mean, I personally want to start a business where we deliver barbecue sandwiches to the boaters out on Robinson and Bird Island at Gulf Shores and Orange Beach. I think that would be great. But a sale could be part of an owner's plan to retire. I mean, the value that owner has probably is in that company.
Mm-hmm.
The sale even could be part of an owner's personal representative's liquidation of the estate following passing. So, Marcus, what happens if the owner or the owner's estate wants or needs to sell the agency? What happens? Where do we go from here?
So at this point, Pat, this is really where the team that you put together really comes into play. Once the owner or owner's family reaches the decision to offer the agency for sale, there's another set of evaluation questions that we need to consider.
Okay.
The first is what is the business worth?
That's what everybody wants to know.
That's kind of I feel like every time we get into a discussion about transitioning and acquisitions, that's kind of the number one thing. How much is my business worth?
It's always the first question that's asked, and it's always the last question that we can really answer.
Yeah, that's right. There's all the other steps that have to go on to fall into place to be able to answer that question.
That's right. Yeah.
So this is where all the operational review work we've talked about earlier will pay off financially. If the owner has done the systems review and documentation of work and developed good onboarding and training, you've got really a great system that you're running.
Yep.
Financials look good. So you've had an owner that's really worked on the business and made it successful instead of in the business. The agency should really be well placed to be marketed to potential buyers. They'll be in a good position to be marketing. Number one, so that's kind of where we're starting. In addition,
good operations.
Yeah, great operations. In addition to well optimized business operation, we talked about. Certainly the agency's profitability over time, will be a major factor. Again, we kind of talked about that. However, profitability is, just a term that may need to be better defined. We talk, there's profitability, there's so many different ways to look at it. So tell us kind of where we're looking at, what's the lens we need to look through, kind of how that all shakes out.
Well, Marcus, the gold standard, the thing that you see in every contract, or most of the contracts we see, deals with financial statements as prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, or GAAP.
Yeah.
Back when I was a CPA, we got GAP'd to death. That was the whole deal. But in the time that I was working as a CPA, and in more recent life of doing due diligence reviews for acquisition candidates, I know from experience that in many cases, the financial statements that are presented bear little resemblance to anything generally accepted accounting principles. I reviewed financial statements that, when we dug into them, had a ton of, let's just say, questionable expense deductions, car payments, truck customizations, lift kits, business travel where there may or may not have been a business meeting anywhere within 1,000 miles. You get the idea. And some of you people are smirking out there. We can't see you, but we know you are, because we've seen this over and over again. These expenses have the effect, perhaps, of lowering an income tax bill, but they also have the effect of understating the true profit and loss performance of the agency, and where your valuation is in part based upon a multiple of your earnings. This can really lower the value of your company. Similarly, you may have some income items that you're trying, people try to keep maybe off hitting the top line for whatever reason. So we've been told. So the first step in the evaluation of sales phase is to get a good handle on the true income of the company. This revolves a detailed review, revision, and very likely a restatement of the company's financial statements during the period of time that's going to be considered in the valuation. And I want to offer you a trick here, and this has been suggested to me, and maybe it's something we'll throw out there, and y'all can shake your head and tilt it sideways if you want to. If you're CPA is the logical person to do this work. They're the number crunchers. They know how to get in between numbers, and they can work through it. But in most states, there's no generally recognized privilege to the communications between a client and the CPA. So if you contract with your CPA to do this work, then it may be discoverable down the road in some sort of proceeding. But if you contract with your attorney as part of the valuation work for the company, and then the attorney contracts with a CPA or a consultant, then the work can be protected from prying eyes, such as maybe IRS or former spouses, by the attorney-client privilege. Just a thought there. We can talk more about that another time.
Right. And Pat, we've all probably heard that the value of a title agency is stated as some, multiple. We talk about that. Everything from 3, 4 to 7 times the average earnings before interest, depreciation, tax, and amortization, that whole EBITDA, factor. And this is certainly a starting point, but within that formula, there's a wide range of objective variables, and outside the objective variables, there is a wide range of subjective variables. So a lot of things come into play when you start to, pin a value on a company. And for example, in an agency where one source of business accounts for 10% or more of the company's revenue, could require a discount of the objective value for the impact of that large account moving its referrals elsewhere. So if you've just got a few big lenders that are your primary source of income and business, those 1 or 2 of those disappear, and your revenue can drastically be reduced. Similarly, an agency that relies on, like, say, a new construction for a large percentage of its policies and closings, could find itself in a revenue slump if new construction declines,
and that happens.
We're not building a lot of new houses. So the mix of clients, and revenue and referral sources, this is a subjective consideration in the valuation of the company. And this is an area where the agency can utilize the services of a business broker or a consultant to address the impact these factors might ultimately have on the valuation.
Exactly. Marcus, the real value of any business is what a willing buyer will pay. There's the fair market value, and that value ultimately is established by negotiation. But a good starting point on that value is by accurately stating the financial statements evaluating and factoring the effect of subjective factors like the ones you mentioned, along with other factors such as the geographic location,
Right.
the company's share of the local market, the economic outlook for the area. I mean, all things considered, a title agency in a fast booming, growing area, say Baldwin County, Alabama, is going to probably have a higher value than an agency with similar numbers in an area that has a declining population. Mm-hmm. So those factors come into play. So after we identify and optimize our operational efficiencies to build value, we make sure we're working on rather than in the business, and make sure we're training and mentoring these future managerial team members, doing the financial statement tune-up, and looking at our subjective variables and coming to a starting point for a value. What now? Where do you go?
Right.
We've made a decision that is either part of an estate plan or some deal. We're going to sell our company. That's mm-hmm. where we need to go. We don't have co-owners or family members. We don't have a buy-sell. This is going to be an out-and-out sale to somebody.
Outside of our four walls.
Outside our four walls. We've done the groundwork. We've done the preliminary evaluation work. What do we do? What's the next step, Marcus?
All right. So, Pat, that gets us into, trying to find, again, a potential buyer that we may not know. Mm-hmm. We may not know who they are. We may not be connected with them. They may be in another state. They may be across the country that's wanting to, establish offices in our area. So we can't successfully sell an agency, Pat, unless we have a buyer. And, we've talked about this, just posting it out there on the internet or on Facebook or, posting something on our website that our agency is now for sale isn't likely to attract us any business.
Put a for sale sign out in front of the office?
And a for sale sign out in front of the office isn't going to get you too many takers.
Probably not, no.
So this is where services like a business broker or investment banker come into play. Engaging these types of companies and professionals can really make a big difference. As you discussed in the book you mentioned earlier,
yep.
Working with a business broker or investment banker will help maximize the value received for your business when the time comes to negotiate the sale.
Yep.
But in the context we're talking about today, business brokers and investment bankers also are the best kind of resources for identifying prospective buyers.
Yeah.
As well as pre-qualifying buyers. So there may be someone that's not in the title business to this point.
Yep.
There may be again, a business broker that has a connection with someone in another state that may be in the title, industry that's looking at, setting up, a new entity or company in your market. So there's a lot of things brokers and investment bankers kind of have resources already kind of out there, and they know and they're connected that can really help, find a prospective buyer.
Well, Marcus, in our business, we work in the real estate world.
Yeah.
And you and I both had friends or family members call us and say, hey, I need to sell my house, or I'm looking to buy a house. Can you recommend an agent to us? And we've done that.
Yeah.
Last week somebody called and says, I want to buy a place down at the coast, and you recommend an agent. Well, yes, I can. When I make that recommendation, it's probably the same way. It goes something like this. Well, why do you, what do you like about that agent? Well, she or he really knows the market. They stay on top of the trends. They seem to always have buyers that are looking to acquire, or if they're representing sellers, they always kind of seem to know where to find the buyers. They always seem to be able to get their asking price. Just all the things that we think about in a good agent.
Right.
So the same is true here for business brokers and investment bankers who specialize or who have specific knowledge in the title industry. And I want to emphasize that knowledge in the title industry, because just as every transaction is different, every area of business is different, and the title industry has its own share of quirks and things that somebody who's not familiar with it probably won't clue in on as quickly as they should.
Yeah, and we've talked about this, and we've even spoken with some business brokers that are general business brokers, and we've even worked with some. But it's really unique to the title industry. Is selling a title company is unique amongst itself, not different than really selling any other type of business. All the factors that go into play. So that really is someone knowing and understanding the industry too.
Right. Yeah. And you know, these professionals, they know a lot of times, as you mentioned, who the prospective buyers are. They know the market. They can help with the offering price. They can help qualify who the real buyers are. You know, it's entirely possible that if once somebody knows that your business is for sale, they decide, I want to come in and take a look around. And they may have no intention of buying your business. They have no ability to buy your business. But what they do have is the ability to steal your employees.
Right.
So, you know, working through a broker, investment banker can help lead through the process and help minimize some of these risks by pre-qualifying the buyers and making sure certain agreements are in place that'll protect you.
You know, as title agents, one of our most important relationships is with our underwriters.
Absolutely.
You know, that's just, we wouldn't be where we're at, you know, but for, you know, the support and kind of partnerships we have with our underwriters. You know, especially our state managers and their teams. They're kind of, to me, the grassroots of, you know, our industry. You know, our agency, we talk with our state managers on a, you know, regular basis. They kind of help us, not which is titled, you know,
Business advisors.
But yeah, they understand kind of the business, they
Mhm.
understand software, they understand a lot of things, but they often also know in agencies that might be looking to make acquisitions, you know, which agencies may be in the process of exploring a sale. So, you know, a lot of times our underwriters are great resources, whether you're looking to buy and acquire or if you're looking to be acquired. You know, several opportunities that, you know, our company has looked at have been the direct result of, you know, an underwriter kind of opening those doors.
Well, they know things that we as operators don't know. You know, they're in those agencies, they're talking to the owners, and you know, they're not going to come to us and say, hey, you need to go talk to so and so because you got a problem.
Right.
You know, they'll just make the introduction. Hey, you may want to talk to South Oak. They may be looking to expand into that area. And they can make that initial introduction, and once you get that, then the professionals team can step in. It's just a matter of being able to make that contact. So the underwriters are a great source for identifying your acquisition partners.
You know, and so that is one of the first, you know, calls to make, you know, is to a state manager, one of your underwriters. Talk to him or her about, you know, what you're looking to accomplish and, you know, what your goals are in, you know, selling and transitioning out of your business. You know, like business brokers, you know, state managers will be able to direct prospective buyers to you. You know, we talked about that a second ago, some of which may have already been vetted by the underwriter. The underwriter may have already kind of had a chance and kind of know kind of their background and history. And so, you know, they may have already gone through, you know, their purchase assistance or financing program. So they may have a good understanding of, you know, some of the opportunities that are out there and some of the ways to connect you with, you know, some of the other companies looking to acquire.
We know finally, and this is not necessarily the last place to look, but finally, take advantage of your local relationships and your regional and national title organizations you participate in. For example, Marcus and I have been active members in the Southeast Land Title Association for many years. We've made lots of professional friendships and relationships around the Southeast through SLTA. If you aren't a participant in your state or regional organization, now's a really good time to become involved. If Marcus and I were trying to find an agency for a client today, trying to look for somebody who was said, hey, we might like to buy, we might like to sell. Probably one of the first places we would look is our SLTA membership directory and start going down the list and making some phone calls. Because those are people that we know and people that likely are potential buyers and sellers might already know as well.
So Pat, you know, we have an idea of our offering price. We've kind of narrowed down and gotten to kind of pricing. You know, we've identified one or more prospective buyers for the agency. You know, now the real courtship begins. Now kind of it all starts to get mixed up and we really start seeing it all come together. The next step likely will be to negotiate and sign, you know, non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements with the prospective buyer. You know, again, your team comes into play at this point. You know, especially your attorney, your broker, you know, just making sure that these documents address the needs of both sides, you know, the buyer and the seller. And often, you know, our off-shelf, we talked about this a second ago, our off-the-shelf confidentiality agreements and some of the documents that are, you know, just kind of general really have to be tweaked to address the unique factors of each deal.
Well, and we, when we worked through this, Marcus and I ran through this earlier and talked about some of this, and something that just occurred to me a minute ago, and I mentioned it, is, if you identify a potential purchaser of your agency, and you're going to let them come in and look under the tent, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to come in to your office, and then they're either through their broker or through their own efforts, they're going to talk to you, they're going to talk to your employees. And if that deal, for whatever reason, doesn't go through, you don't want them to come in and start offering jobs to your key employees.
Knowing what salary and compensation packages are, knowing what your finances are, knowing who your primary clients are. I mean, there's a lot of things.
There's a lot of things
that you lifted, the hood up and shown a lot. And
so we want to make sure that those non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements also contain a non-solicitation agreement, especially if you're talking to somebody who's local.
That's right.
And that can happen. I mean, you and I both, in our title operations world, if there are certain competitors, if we knew that they were thinking of selling, we would be an interested party to acquire those. So just want to make sure that you're working with your attorneys, working with your brokers, to make sure that all those boxes are checked and your interests are protected.
Pat, next may be a letter of intent. That's kind of the next part of the process, which would describe the next steps, between the parties, and it kind of lays out the general terms. It's not really binding like the agreement, but it just kind of lays out the roadmap, for a future acquisition agreement. The form of the acquisition, the timing of the acquisition, the role of key personnel and the selling owner, among other things that are wrapped up in these agreements. And so once these documents are in place, the prospective buyer will need to conduct its own due diligence. So the buyer will kind of do some of the things we've talked about from a seller side, just kind of getting ready and kind of taking a real dive into acquiring this company. Many of us have been through financial statements or an audit or a best practice certification. We've all kind of done those, and this due diligence process can seem like some of those, but even kind of more intense or kind of ramped up.
Absolutely, they do.
So it's easy to become frustrated, during this process, Pat. The answer to every question seems to bring on, more questions, and the request and production of one document, adds 5 more documents that get requested, but it is just part of the process. And so, just consider this, if I was about to invest hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars into, buying a company, I'd want to know everything there is to know about it. So if you're going to, as a buyer, invest in, put the money in place, go through the process to acquire a company, you're going to want to, really take a deep dive.
Well, think about it this way. I used to be in-house counsel for a large real estate company as part of my jobs. We always advised the buyers, always get a home inspection.
Mm-hmm.
Always get a home inspection. Always get a home inspection. You think about this, if you're about to spend $1 million on a house, wouldn't you want the best home inspection you could get? You want everything inspected. You want to know that when you put that money down, you know exactly what you're getting. And that's really what the due diligence process is all about. The due diligence process can and often does result in further negotiation of the purchase price. And this is just part of the process of finding the fair market value, that mythical, figure that the purchaser and seller agree on, neither one of them, being under any duress or pressure to buy or sell. So it seems like a real pain. Sometimes you're in that due diligence process, you wonder, why am I even bothering? I don't really want to do some more, but bear with it. Bear with it.
Yeah. And then you get to the end of the due diligence process, and the consultants and lawyers will put together a definitive acquisition agreement. So that time comes and the process will move forward to completion. So you've gotten through the due diligence. You've really kind of nailed down what the real bullet points are and the real key issues and the real terms. And the acquisition agreement will address, all those items, let alone just the pricing. You've kind of nailed down a pricing.
Well, you got, what else? You got pricing, you got purchase price, how to be paid, lump sum, buyout, is it a formula, is it, is it paid as a portion of revenue, a portion of EBITDA, percentage over what time, how long. There's likely to be a non-compete, non-solicitation agreement for the owners at least, and maybe some of the key employees. Oftentimes buyers are going to want employment contracts,
right?
Maybe retention bonuses for certain employees to make sure that they stay. And one of the unfortunate things or difficult things about acquisitions is sometimes you consolidate back office operations, you consolidate plant operations, something, and you have people that maybe aren't going to be needed. The acquisition agreement can discuss outplacement opportunities and services that those employees are going to get. So that's going to be an agreement that's going to take some time to work out. It's going to go through several back and forth between the lawyers, and like I said, it's going to be totally different probably than what we started with, but it's part of the process, and it's the the next to last thing you want to have happen.
Yeah, and so Pat, this is where the advice and counsel of your whole succession team, really will become invaluable.
Right.
Remember that during all this time you're still running the business, you're doing the day-to-day stuff, making sure that the company's profits don't sag, that employees remain on board, and handling, the details of this transition, all is part of this process. You're juggling all these, kind of balls in the air in the midst of trying to figure out a transition and exit strategy. But in the end, the planning, the time investment, and the expense of retaining a qualified group of professionals to help you design and implement your succession, transition, and business continuity plan will really result in a rich return on that investment that you made.
That is so true. All right, so let's summarize here what we've talked about. Every title agency needs a succession, or transition, and business continuity plan. Let's stop there. If you don't have one in your business, and you have one takeaway from ALTA 1 this year, that one takeaway is to go back to your office or back to home, that's where you're working from, and start this process.
And let's talk about that just real quick, because again, we talked about this at the beginning. Having a succession plan doesn't mean you're selling and getting out of the business tomorrow.
No.
It really is a plan.
It shouldn't be.
No, you're right. It really should not be. Hopefully you're creating a plan, number one, to better your business, but also looking, forward down the road.
2, 4, 6, 5, 10 years in terms of when you may want to transition into something else. But at the same time, you could get run over by that proverbial truck.
And there is always that.
And so to start and go home, go back to your office and have an honest review of your current operations and implement the processes and systems that need to be so that your jobs are not dependent on that name specific employee doing that. Will help that transition in terms of a change of management or ownership and help keep that value up.
And and kind of another thing, talking about just takeaways, you don't necessarily have to go find a consulting company to come alongside you. I mean, it's something, we've done it with Title Success, come alongside different title, agencies. But you can do it just in-house. I mean, and really put a plan together.
You at least very well start that process in-house. The book, the build to sell, be a good read to start and get an idea of what
just
the
all the
process looks like. That's right.
And so I guess I don't want people to walk away and think, oh, I've got to go, hire a consultant, and everybody kind of hits that kind of panic of I've got to bring in a big team. You can start where you're at. Business owners, again, should focus on working on their business. We talk about that all the time, talking about the E-myth instead of in their business, so that they can't see kind of the big picture of what's happening. So that new management or an ownership group isn't dependent on the current owner's labors to continue the success of that business. And so that's really one of the big takeaways when you are kind of taking a step back and looking at kind of where my business is at. You as the owner, are you able to kind of step away so that if there is a transition, there's not that dependency?
So one would be start the process. Read the book, have the conversation. 1. 2 would be to make sure that you are working on your business. Work with the goal in mind, that the knowledge that someday you aren't going to be at that business.
That's right.
So when that time comes, work on making sure that you've done everything you can to maximize the value of that business for the new owners and for you. Next, third thing, take an objective look through unbiased eyes at the current state of the company and consider all the matters that affect the value of the company.
Right. Work with your business broker, investment bankers, along with your underwriters and industry association to identify purchase. That's kind of the next thing. If you're down the road of trying to find a buyer or trying to find some help in making a transition, surround yourself with those people that are connected and know people that are looking to acquire. And so those are kind of, again, another step in this process as we wrap up.
Well, and we remember these days, or still in our days as attorneys, when somebody comes to us for advice and we quote them a fee and they're sometimes shocked by the fee. Business brokers and investment bankers are going to charge for their services. They do. That's how they get paid. I tend to think that those who do a good job are worth it, but you may be put off by that. If you are, that's okay. Call your underwriter.
Right.
They're not going to charge you anything to have the conversation, and they may be very well able to help you start that process so that when you do decide to bring a broker or investment banker in, a lot of that groundwork has been done, and will ultimately cut down on what the success fee may be, to those professionals. It's a process. The planning, the design, the implementation, and the execution of business succession continuity plan is a process. If you go ahead and decide that you're going to embrace the process, understanding that your title agency is probably the largest asset in your portfolio. Whoever succeeds your role in that company, whether it's an in-house group or whether it's a third party, this is probably going to be one of the largest investments they ever make. Right. So let that process come together to put all of the pieces in place, and then let the dominoes start to fall when the time comes.
Yeah. And then finally, rely on your trusted advisors. I mentioned a minute ago, when you're starting the process and kind of going through the checklist and, some of those things you can do in-house and start. But when it really comes time, you really need to surround yourself with the team to guide you through all the pieces, and so at the end, you can enjoy the fruits of your labor and all the things you've put in to build your company, so you can really move on and have a successful transition. And this is really, at the end of the day, what it's about. You and I, again, have seen either doors closed and someone that spent a lifetime building a business never really saw the value, just realized at the end, and surrounding yourself and surrounding yourself with a team and putting a plan in place can really make it where it's a positive outcome at the end of the day.
Absolutely. That's about all the time that we have. It's probably all the time you want to spend listening to two guys with really strong Southern accents. But we thank you for your time, and we wish you well as you undertake to design your own succession and continuity plan.
If you have any questions or would like to help in designing a succession plan, please reach out to us at Title Success Solutions. We'd love to help and would love an opportunity to work with you. You can find us at our website as TitleSuccess.com.
Thank you for your time.